straight year, OU football coaches are dealing with felony charges against a Sooner recruit before he got to campus. And OSU's wide receiver depth chart has been reshuffled by criminal charges and dismissals. From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Mike Sherman, and this is the Bedlam Nation Conversation. Joining us today, OU beat writer Jake Trotter, OSU beat writer Scott Wright. Jake, let's start with you. Last year was Josh Jarboe. This time, it's a defensive end named Justin Chason from Vegas. Who is Chason and what's happened?
Well, he was one of the top recruits in this recruiting class, 2009, out of Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman High School, which is the same high school of Ryan Reynolds and DeMarco Murray. So it's a pipeline the Sooners are familiar with. And right now he's facing several felony charges, allegedly for holding a screwdriver to his girlfriend's neck, among other things, his ex-girlfriend's neck. But he's in a lot of trouble right now because of the number of counts that he's looking at and the severity of some of them.
What's OU's response been thus far?
Well, no comment until they know more information, which is probably the expected route they would take. I think it's going to be very hard for them to take Chason on campus if these charges hold because, Josh Jarboe is a similar example of something that happened last year. And the reason he was allowed to come to OU is his charges were pleaded down to misdemeanors under the First Offenders Act in Georgia under gun laws. That's not going to happen here because of the particular crimes that allegedly were committed. So I think he has a very slim chance of ever making it to Norman, at least at this point.
You mentioned the Bishop Gorman connection. How does that impact this decision? Is it in any way sensitive in how OU handles it? Because they've had such a good relationship with that school and such good results.
Yeah, that's true. Murray, Reynolds, David White, who's a grad assistant, and then they're looking at another kid who's a tight end at Gorman. Is going to be a rising senior next year. So they have to be very delicate about how they handle it. They don't want to ruin a pipeline. Gorman's one of the great talent pools in the state of Nevada, if not, the southwest part of the country. So, and it's been very good to OU so far. The other thing, too, with Justin is he doesn't have any prior problems that we know of, so that might help him in the court of law as well. And we'll just have to see how it plays out. But OU has to be careful in how they deal with it. The situation with Jarboe is they took him to school, and then he ended up embarrassing them with the YouTube video, and eventually they had to kick him off the campus just a few days later. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it, but at this point I think his chances of making it to Norman are slim. Okay,
Jake will have more on this story today on News OK. On the other side, we'll come back and talk about Oklahoma State spring football and the issues the Cowboys are dealing with. We're back on the Bedlam Nation Conversation, sponsored by Dodge. Scott Wright, OSU beat writer, here with us. Scott, OSU's got its own criminal justice issues, namely Bo Bowling, who's been suspended pending the outcome of some misdemeanor and felony drug charges. And then Damian Davis gets kicked off the team for unspecified rules violations. That's really reshuffled the receiving depth chart. Tell us what's the latest there.
Well, as far as Bo Bowling, he'll be back in court on April 17th. We'll see how this case progresses. His attorney had filed a motion to have the case dismissed, citing that an illegal search and seizure, essentially. But there's been no ruling on that to this point. We'll see what happens when he gets back in the courtroom on April 17th. As far as the wide receiver depth chart, it's really a big mess right now because Dez Bryant is injured and not taking part in spring practice. So you've got a whole lot of guys that haven't done much in their careers out there trying to step in and kind of prove themselves and earn some playing time. Josh Cooper, a sophomore from Mustang, is a guy that is getting looked at a lot of different positions, and I think has a chance to kind of step into to multiple roles next year. And another guy, Justin Blackman, a redshirt freshman from Ardmore, kind of built a lot like Dez Bryant. I'm not saying that he's the next Dez Bryant, but very similar build. And coaches have been raving about what he did last year with the scout team, and then early on in spring ball.
Opportunity for him, as you've written before, these Damian Davis and Bo Bowling, they caught 4 of the 6 touchdown passes that did not go to Dez Bryant. Now, as you wrote on your OSU blog on News OK yesterday, there is an intriguing receiver possibility emerging out there for OSU. What is it?
Dante Foster at Guthrie. There's a really good chance, and it could be nailed down even later today. or early next week, that he is going to walk on at Oklahoma State. Dante really wanted to get a scholarship offer, but Oklahoma State was really the place that he wanted to go. If he was going to play football, it was going to be at Oklahoma State. The problem really came up the fact that it kind of got out that he wasn't going to play football early on in the recruiting process, and that wasn't necessarily the case. He was kind of telling some other schools that, but Oklahoma State he was kind of hoping would pursue him a little bit harder. And at this point, Oklahoma State never had him into a camp, so they didn't really know exactly how fast he was, and hadn't seen a lot of his athletic tools up close. So, to risk a scholarship on that guy late in the recruiting process would have been a really big risk. So, by allowing him to walk on, that really kind of negates the risk. And Dante Foster is a guy that if the belief had been out there that he was going to play college football, would I think be a lot higher rated as far as the players within the state and the country. He's a really talented wide receiver.
Okay, for those who haven't been on YouTube or maybe haven't heard the buzz, tell us who Dante Foster is.
He is just a phenomenally athletic kid, about 6'2", 180 pounds. There are some kids that are just playmakers, and that's what this guy is. I mean, not a lot of guys, out of high school have multiple YouTube clips when you go and check it out. But he's got them for football, for an amazing one-handed catch that he made, the basketball play that was the top play on SportsCenter earlier this year. The guy just has a knack for making plays, very athletic, good size, good speed, and like I said, if people had thought that he was going to be a football player, he would have been a really highly recruited player.
Led Guthrie to back-to-back state titles in basketball and hit 18 of 20 at the line in the state championship that year. That's a little moxie.
I mean, he would be playing, if he didn't want to walk on at Oklahoma State, if he ends up not walking on at Oklahoma State, he'll go play Division I basketball somewhere.
Before you run off and check those Dante Foster YouTube clips, stick around after the break. We'll be talking more about spring football, backup quarterbacks on both campuses. We're back on the Bedlam Nation conversation, sponsored by Dodge. We're talking about quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks, and the promise of spring football. Guys, how's the backup quarterback situation shaping up at each school? Scott, you go first.
Well, Oklahoma State's in a kind of a unique situation. They've got two guys who have been on the campus for a while. Alex Cade is going to be a junior next year, and Brandon Whedon a sophomore. Both guys have redshirted as well. So guys that have been around for quite a while. Kate is obviously still in kind of the same position where he's been running an offense like this both in high school and at OSU for a longer period of time and is more comfortable. Whedon is a really athletically gifted guy, obviously played professional baseball for a while, great arm, and moves around pretty well. They're both still developing, and it's really kind of a neck-and-neck battle right now going into the end of spring. Gunny wants to name a number 2 by the end of spring, but he wanted to name a number 2 by the end of August last year and didn't get there then either.
And didn't have to because the worries about Zach Robinson really never did emerge. Here's a guy who's a dual-threat quarterback, runs a lot, takes a lot of shots, but very durable. Could we see the same situation? Could these guys go into next spring still battling it out?
Yeah, I definitely think that's possible. They really toned down the running game with Zach until they needed it, and were able to protect him pretty well. And as this battle goes on, it gets even more interesting. You've got Clint Shelf from Enid coming in, and then they've got 2 commitments, including Johnny Deaton from Sand Springs for the 2010 class, and that's when they're really going to be heating up to figure out who is replacing Zach Robinson.
Okay, Jake, let's talk about OU, and what are you hearing about the great Landry Jones?
Well, before OU went on spring break last week, they had a scheduled scrimmage that was trimmed down because of weather, so they went indoors and had sort of a 50% simulated scaled back scrimmage. And the guy that Stoops singled out from that scrimmage and from the practices leading up was Landry Jones. Said he'd made big improvement this spring, and that's kind of what we saw from Sam Bradford a couple of years ago. Bradford came into the spring of his redshirt freshman year without a lot of experience and really made a big jump, not only in December while they were practicing for the bowl game, but in the spring early on as well.
Let's forget Landry Jones is a 4-star recruit from New Mexico.
Artesia, New Mexico. He's about 6'4", 215. OU's quarterbacks right now, they have 6'4", 6'4", 6'6". So they have some big
nice
prototypical guys. Yeah, it would be a nice basketball front line.
Okay, guys, finally, we're a couple weeks from the spring game conversation, but who has impressed you and maybe the coaching staff most? Jake, let's start with you.
Well, the guy that we've heard about a little bit is Adron Tennell at wide receiver. You look at the team last year, and they had a senior wide receiver really step up in Quentin Chaney. They're hoping to get the same thing from Tennell. Sometimes it takes guys a little bit longer to grasp the system and really step up and play like they're capable of playing. Defensively, the freshman linebackers, I think, have impressed a little bit. But we're still waiting to see some of the younger guys back there. A very veteran group on the defense. So, there's not a bunch of guys getting the reps that you would see at wide receiver or on the offensive line offensively because of the guys they're replacing.
Okay, Scott, how about the Cowboys?
Earlier, I mentioned Justin Blackman, the wide receiver from Ardmore. He's been a guy that's been creating a buzz for quite a while now. Defensively, a lot of talk about a lot of defensive linemen. Nigel Nicholas is a kid who redshirted last year, beefed up to about 280, 285, could move inside. He was recruited as a defensive end. Might stay out there, might move inside, might do a little bit of both. Derek Burton has moved from end to tackle, and they're really pleased with that experiment so far. And Chris Donaldson is a junior college transfer from that big class last year, who kind of got shuffled to the back of the depth chart because he was a little bit behind schedule when he came in. Has really impressed Bill Youngs in his time here.
Okay, thanks, guys. That's all for the Bedlam Nation conversation, sponsored by Dodge. But you can continue the discussion at the only fan website devoted to OU and OSU. That's bedlamnation.com.